Megan hadn't been back to her hometown in 12 years. She left the small farming community right after high school, swearing she would never return. Growing up on the edge of endless cornfields had left her with memories she never wanted to face again. As a child, she remembered walking home at dusk, the tall stalks rustling when no wind was blowing. Sometimes she thought she heard her name whispered from deep inside the rows. Her father called it imagination, but her mother never disagreed. Now, 30 years old, she drove the same cracked highway she once escaped. Her mother had passed, and her father was selling the land. Megan was only here to sign papers. The farmhouse stood at the end of a gravel road, the fields stretching like a black ocean around it. The house looked smaller than she remembered, but the silence of the fields hadn't changed. Inside, the air smelled of dust and mildew. Furniture was covered with sheets, but the floor creaked the same way it had when she was a child sneaking to the kitchen at night. She walked into her old bedroom where the wallpaper still peeled at the corners. For a second, she thought she heard the faint sound of breathing behind her. When she turned, nothing was there. Her father greeted her with little warmth. He was older, thinner, but his eyes still carried that sharpness she remembered. "Sign the papers and you can go," he said. Megan nodded, but unease filled her chest. She wanted to finish quickly. That night, the whispers returned. Lying in her childhood bed, she heard them outside the window. Soft, hushed, almost like a chorus. At first, she thought it was just the wind moving through the corn. But then, the voices formed words. They said her name. The next morning, Megan tried to push the whispers out of her mind. She told herself it was just her imagination, stirred up by old memories. But when she walked into the kitchen, her father looked at her strangely. "You didn't go outside last night, did you?" he asked. She shook her head, confused. "Good," he muttered, sipping his coffee. "Don't." After breakfast, Megan stepped out onto the porch. The cornfields stretched endlessly in every direction, their edges blurring into the horizon. The stalks swayed gently, though the air was still. She felt the same uneasy pull she had as a child, as if the fields wanted her to step inside. Against her better judgment, she did. The sound changed immediately. The world outside the rows grew muffled, as if the corn swallowed every noise. Her footsteps crunched softly on dry soil. After a few minutes, she lost sight of the house. The stalks seemed taller here, their leaves brushing against her arms like fingers. Then she heard it again, the whisper. Faint at first, then clearer. It wasn't just her name this time. It was her mother's voice. "Megan! Come back!" Her chest tightened. She spun in circles, trying to locate the sound, but the rows all looked the same. She forced herself to run, shoving stalks aside until she stumbled out into the open again. Her father was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. "I told you not to go in there," he said. His face was pale, eyes full of something that looked like fear. "That field doesn't belong to us anymore." That night, Megan couldn't sleep. The whispers returned, louder than before. They came from every direction. Some sounded like children laughing, others wept. And beneath it all, she heard her mother's voice again, repeating the same words, over and over. "You shouldn't have come back." By the third day, Megan was ready to leave. She told her father she would sign whatever papers he needed, but he hesitated. His hands shook as he handed her the documents. "Before you go," he said quietly, "you need to know the truth." He explained that the fields had always been strange. Long before their family owned the land, people whispered about missing children, about voices calling from the corn. Farmers disappeared, leaving their tools behind. Livestock wandered into the stalks and never came out.
Her father admitted he had heard the whispers too, but chose to ignore them. Her mother hadn't. Megan froze. Her mother had always insisted the voices were real. Late at night, she would stand at the edge of the fields, listening. The night she vanished, Megan was only 16. Everyone assumed she ran away. But now her father's voice cracked as he admitted the truth. The field took her. Megan felt the ground shift beneath her. Rage boiled up inside her chest. "And you stayed here?" she demanded. "You kept living on this land like nothing happened?" Her father's face hardened. "Because if we leave, it follows us. It always follows." That evening, Megan stood by her old bedroom window, staring out at the rose swaying gently in the moonlight. The whispers were louder now, impossible to ignore. They weren't just calling her name, they were pleading, begging, warning. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the voices grew sharper. Her mother's voice cut through the rest. "Don't trust him." When Megan turned, she saw her father standing in the doorway, watching her in silence. His eyes were distant, almost empty.
The final night came heavy with tension. Megan packed her things, determined to leave before sunrise. But the whispers wouldn't let her. They grew louder the moment she tried to sleep, pulling her name, pulling her deeper. She stormed into her father's room, demanding answers, but found it empty. The bed hadn't been slept in. His truck was still outside, but he was gone. Panic clawed at her chest. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The cornfield rustled violently, though no wind blew. Then she saw it, her father's figure standing between the rows, motionless. She shouted his name, but he didn't respond. Slowly, he raised his hand, beckoning her forward. Her legs carried her into the field before her mind could stop them. The rows closed around her, shadows shifting unnaturally. The whispers now sounded like hundreds of voices, all speaking at once. Her flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of faces between the stalks, faces pale and hollow, mouths moving without sound. She pushed deeper until she reached a small clearing. There, her father stood, but his face was wrong. His eyes were black voids, his mouth stretched too wide. "It's your turn," he said in a voice that wasn't his. The ground split beneath her feet. Hands reached up from the soil, pulling at her ankles. She screamed, trying to fight, but the whispers drowned her voice. The last thing she saw was her mother's face in the shadows, lips moving silently. When the sun rose, the house was empty. Megan's car still sat in the driveway. Her bag remained on the bed, but Megan herself was gone. The neighbors would say the same thing they had for years, that the fields of Hollow Creek were cursed. And once you heard the whispers, you never truly left.